welcome. I'm Holly Miami, and this is my take on our year out and about filming, all you brilliant gang. The clips you'll see were chosen by the team to represent the events that we've covered, and also specifically what made us giggle. Miami Media started off the year way back in January. From September the previous year and all the way through, we've been filming indoor events such as music concerts and gigs and stuff like that. We even managed to do a charity fire walk, and more importantly, we were commissioned to cover an event for International Women's Day. But for the purposes of this film, we'll start in May when we went back out and about just to see you all. Cheltenham Pride. Now this one is the season opener for us. There's not much going on before, and because it's a Pride in Gloucestershire gig, we do like to cover it. Last year's event was cut short because it was an absolute downpour and threatened on drowning our poor gear out. But that didn't happen this year. We managed to go right the way through. But what it does highlight, we had a shift in production techniques because we wanted to cut down post-production time due to the amount of events we were going to cover this year. Instead of doing the pieces to camera, a bit like I'm doing now, we cut these out completely and made you gang out there, do all the welcome to things. And it looked a bit like this.
Welcome to Cheltenham Pride.
I'm Stephen and welcome to Cheltenham Pride.
University of Gloucestershire and welcome to Cheltenham Pride.
Welcome to Cheltenham Pride!
Welcome to Cheltenham Pride! We are all assembled! Welcome to Cheltenham Pride! Woo!
Whitney Pride was next. Good old Whitney. This was their second event and followed on with the same successful format from the previous year. A couple of the highlights off this one were meeting up and managing to film the delightful Billy and Louie, who was sort of like a modern day Everly Brothers, but more of them a bit later on. More importantly, this was one where I met up with my old mate Kyle Finn. You know, we filmed Kyle a lot. He's always good entertainment, and even better on this event when he had a complete wardrobe fail. You'd nothing funnier than to see the guy dancing around, you know he goes out into the crowd, dancing around the crowd, trying to hold his chaps up. Ooh, missus.
I've been married a long time ago. Where did you come from? Where did you go? Where did you come from? If I've been I've been married a long time ago. Where did you come from? Where did you go? Where did you come from?
Redditch Pride. Now this was a bit of a last minute change of heart for us. We were due to go somewhere else, but I saw this one being advertised just a week or so before the actual event date, and as I used to live in Redditch years ago, it sort of formed a little bit of a pattern that happened this year, going back to places I've lived, just in case anybody there recognised me from how I was. Pretty unlikely, bearing in mind how I am these days, but Redditch particularly, as it turned out, it's turned into my second home, but there you go. So highlights of this one particularly were the organisers' brilliant decision, bearing in mind first event with a parade, to take the parade slap bang through the middle of the big prestigious Kingfisher shopping centre. You have never seen anything in your life like a couple of hundred bright colourful people marching, making as much noise in this enclosed shopping precinct. It was an absolute blast. Hereford Pride. Now, Hereford were the organisers who had fallen foul of all sorts of ups and downs in previous years. So, in effect, this was their first event for a while. Now, every Pride basically falls into a pattern. There wasn't a parade with Hereford, it was a park event, but there's a stage and there's bars and there's stalls, and they decided to hold this event at Hereford Racecourse, so plenty of space for everything. But bearing in mind that this film is all about standout events as far as our team is concerned, the standout event for this one must have been the Bubble People. Yeah, now we've seen bubbles, and we've seen the bubble machines, and we've seen the blowing bubbles. These were a couple of people who, and I don't know whether it was their idea or whether they'd seen it somewhere themselves before, but they were making huge, giant bubbles with some string loops and stuff like that. The kids and even some of the adults were going nuts over it. So gentle, so spiritual, such a brilliant idea. We liked it. Next, Blackburn Pride. Now, you know I love Blackburn. I think theirs was first one last year. This was the one where they sort of put a whole Pride together, including a parade, in about 4 months. So this year they had a load more time to actually arrange it. The Blackburn people are absolutely party people to the core. They probably come second to my all-time favourite, the Geordies, but they know how to party. And the organisers seem to pick up on this. And they came up with what I probably think is a brilliant idea, and I don't think I've seen any other organisers do it yet, but they should. Put a club DJ with his setup on the stage. That's it, just the DJ and his setup. What it turned into, effectively, was Ibiza in Lancashire. What a cracking idea. Have a look. Cirencester Pride. Now, this was Pride in Gloucestershire's, who for the rest of this film I'll just call PIG because it's less of a mouthful. PIG's second small event. These things are park only, usually on a Sunday, and for this season they decided to change the entertainment format, so they more concentrated on local to the area of the event and under the radar acts, including roping in their own committee and everything else to do a turn on the stage and all the rest of it. What came out of it was something really quite refreshing. Have a look. Abergavenny Pride. Now, yet again, this was another one where I'd kept my eye on the Pride committee and the Pride organisation for some time, and they managed to get their event together this year. Now, again, it's along the trend of, I actually lived in Abergavenny for a while, so there were ghosts to lay, as I managed to blag myself onto the stage for a while and explain to the people how brilliant it was to see Abergavenny so accepting and so forward thinking. Because when I lived there in the 70s, it was a completely different place.
I was married in 1977, and my wife and I were walking home one day. We'd been in a local pub just for a drink, and on the way home, I was attacked, beaten up, and completely had my face smashed. Lost my teeth. And do you know what my heinous crime was? Was I walking down the street in a pink mini skirt and stilettos? Not in 1977, darling. I'd moved from Newport and married one of their women.
Worcester Carnival. Living in Worcester, as I do, I had this idea that I'm going to be pushing the boundaries on the kind of events I cover. Miami Media has centred, particularly for our outdoor events, on LGBT associated events, and this year was the year I was going to do more what I call straight events, and this was the first one that we're going to cover this year. Carnival in all senses of how it is. So basically there is, I would call a park event, but with the carnival, the parade, which includes everything, including motorised floats, walking exhibits, is usually at the end of the event, which is quite a bit of a turnaround. But what it did allow was for me to be tracking a parade, but a completely different kind of parade, and obviously having to keep out of the way of 42-ton Arctics, which all added to the fun. What did make me laugh is sort of this girl failed in one of the most basic ethics of when you're out on a parade, try and keep your equipment as safe as possible. And when you see a bubble coming straight towards you, turn the camera around. Oops, splat, you even heard it. Bromsgrove Pride. Now, you know we've done a couple of Bromsgroves already, and it kind of made me smile a bit because the first one they did was on the tag end of 2021, where a lot of people try to stuff events in like September and October, and all got caught out by the weather. So their first one was, I think, October. It hammered down with rain, and it was another one of these ones we had to duck out a bit early to save the gear. Last year, they moved to July, all well and good. This year, they moved to July and got drowned out by the weather, because we all know what happened in July this year. And what it did show, as well as them adding a small parade to this, what it did show, the people of Bromsgrove were determined not to let, and I am talking pretty torrential rain, spoil their day. So what did they do? They just carried on enjoying themselves. There is nothing better than the sight of people dancing in pouring rain in front of a stage with big smiles on their faces. Worcestershire Pride. This followed on the week after Bromsgrove. So Bromsgrove, it hammered down with rain, and a week later, it was still raining. In fact, the weather people had already put, I think it was yellow weather warnings or something in place for rain, and a lot of the organisations were cancelling because basically they were in fields and everything was sinking. Worcestershire, by chance or maybe by design, had put their event back on Copenhagen Street car park, which is tarmac and sloped. So they were pretty safe with nothing's going to sink into anything. But yet again, it hammered down with rain. So yet again, we were treated to the spectacle of everybody dancing around. Now, Worcestershire is a big event, so there was more people dancing in the rain. And this was my first introduction to a brilliant gang from Worcester's Sixth Form College who partied like they'd no partying before. I picked these people up a couple of times as the year went on around the local prides, but they certainly knew how to party in the rain.
I can see the sun light up the sky. So we hit the road and roll. I'm blinded by the light. Why ain't speak back till I feel your touch? I said, ooh, I'm blinded by the light. Well, I'm like this.
Cinderford Pride. Now, this was the third of PIG's small Sunday events, and it was held yet again in Cinderford Market, which is, as the name suggests, a little marketplace, middle of Cinderford, a sort of a triangle of tarmacked area with a roof. Now, last year it was great because last year, if you remember rightly, was extremely hot around about July and August, and it enabled people a little bit to shelter from the nasty heat and all the rest of it. This year, it's got a stick in my mind, for it's a case of, you're going to do what? Like I said, on their other small events, the committee, and in this case the chairperson Richard, decided to do a turn themselves, and Richard decided to string a conga together. in Cinderford Marketplace, which is right next to the main roads, and Richard suddenly wheeled this line of people out onto a live main road. The look on the security guys' faces when they realise what was going to happen, when they have to suddenly shut down the main drag through town at 3 seconds notice with just 2 of them on their own. Ah, you can't make this up. This is genuinely how stuff happens.
Right, I'm going to join.
You can join the back of this. Come on, Scott. You can join the back of this. You can join the back. I'm looking at hard. We're going to keep going. How many have we got? I want to get about 50 or 60 people in here. We're going to have
Redditch Pop-Up Beach. Now, this was a strange one. On the back of, you're going to get to hear a lot of this on this particular film. On the back of us doing Redditch Pride, our work was noticed, and the organisers for this pop-up beach was basically, for 3 days, they were going to, as the name suggests, build a beach in the middle of Redditch town centre, and people were going to have sandcastles and deck chairs and play in the sand in the middle of their town. Brilliant idea. The people who organised this, which were a gang called Redditch BID, I think it's some business improvement department or something, put this up, and they commissioned Miami Media to film this. Now, because they commissioned it, basically, it's their copyright, so we couldn't post any of this because they'd effectively bought the copyright. So what we did manage to do, yet again, because it was on the tail end of July, the second of the 3 days, it absolutely hammered it down. And they decided that they couldn't take the covers off what effectively is a very large sand pit because the sand would effectively wash away. So for the second day, the event was best part cancelled. What that did allow was for the organisers, who were very down in the mouth because of course they put a lot of work into all this, to suddenly have a little release of tension and to splash in the puddles on the beach. So they didn't have the sand, but they almost had the sea. Have a look. Malvern Pride, back to Prides again, so the ones we can actually post on our socials, which you'll have seen as the year has gone on. As you know, Malvern is another favourite of mine. They were started off as a small Pride. There's still a park event. It's still held in, I think it's Priory Park in Malvern. Still a brilliant event, but their forte, and it seems to be a lot of the organisers have their own directions and leanings. Their forte is to put something on entertainment-wise that's completely out of the ballpark on what you'd normally expect at an event. Last year they had Malvern Samba, which are a band that normally leads parades, actually doing a turn in the main arena. Everybody went absolutely bats for dancing round just the samba beats. This year they went a little bit better. They had one of the local Zumba dance groups in the middle, just doing some Zumba dancing. If you ever witnessed the sight of a whole field full of people Zumbering, I just invented that word, Zumbering along to what was happening, yet again, Malvern, they pulled the rabbit out of the hat. It just means now that they've got to do even better next year. Ho hum. Plymouth Pride. Now, this was the second event this year that we were going to do some serious miles and book an overnight. Obviously, the first one was Blackburn. That was a little bit earlier on in the year. I did try and cut down my mileage for this year because we wanted to concentrate more on more local events. But Plymouth was, for me, a chance to meet up with some friends that I knew from the radio game, and also to do a Pride that I wouldn't normally have done. Now with Plymouth, it also got bitten by the weather. Not rain this time, but this week, bearing in mind it was only a week away from all the rainy stuff, it was a yellow weather warning for wind. Now, Plymouth is obviously on the coast, so if you're going to get winds, they know how to do it. It was really quite frightening in a way. If you've ever seen or even never seen a full-size big top, circus big top size marquee with 300 people in it, all dancing along. If you've never actually seen one of those move in the wind, frightening old things. It didn't actually cause any huge problems, but it was a frightening old thing to see. Swindon and Wiltshire Pride, or Swindon as I call it. Now, as you know, we did their event last year, and that was the one where Canberra Girl had to be treated by the paramedics for heat stroke. No such great disasters this year. It was nice, but it wasn't over the top type kind of heat, and it carried on great. They do a good event, nice parade, right through Swindon Town Centre and out to the park on the outskirts of the town there. Lovely, lovely. Unfortunately, Swindon threw up one of the rare cases of, I'll call them hate crimes. There was a guy going around being totally anti-LGBT at the beginning. Obviously, he must have tagged himself onto the parade. I didn't notice because I was at the front filming. But it turned out he was making a real nuisance of himself on the park area. So much so that he had to be escorted off by the local police. Now, it's good to see the police getting on top of this and dealing with this just how it should be. On a more upbeat note, you remember me mentioning Billy and Louie from Whitney? They appeared at this particular Pride as well, and I managed to get more of their set. These guys are really going to go places. Like I say, they sort of do contemporary modern songs, but the harmonies, and yes, they are twins, so obviously this is where it comes from. The harmonies are pure Everly Brothers. Have a look at this.
Strumming my pain with his fingers, singing my life with his words, killing me softly with his song, killing me softly with his song, telling my whole life with his words, killing me softly with his song.
What's the show? On the back of, I said you'd be hearing a lot of that, on the back of our work with Worcester Carnival, Worcester Show, which is a sort of a cross between a small agricultural show and an outdoor gig, got in touch with us and asked us to cover the event, and it was a nice, brilliant, multicultural mix of entertainment. One of the organisations there, called Worcester Mela, covered a lot of the Indian and Asian kind of music. They even had some Bhangra drummers, which I believe the same ones that were in Redditch Pride, Bhangra drummers going around and leading the small parade they had on the show. It all turned out to be really rather good, and the absolute outstanding part was from a couple of people called Seven Eyes. That was the name of the act. You look at the girls singing and say, is that voice coming out of that body? Brilliant. Well done, Worcester Show. Warwickshire Pride, as you know, held in the town of Leamington Spa. Their parade, which you can't call a parade because it goes down the street called the parade, so they have to have a march because you can't have a parade down the parade. Lovely Regency Street, nice long straight street, so as you imagine we get some really good long shot footage of the marchers going down through there. But Warwickshire always, they're another one of these prides who always manage to pull a rabbit out of the hat. This year, and this sort of outran them a bit, this year they came up with the idea of pulling a couple of the general public up on stage and having a dance competition. Now, I'm not quite sure what happened and why it happened, but as you'll see in this clip, This is probably the first time this year that any of my videos have got anywhere near X-rated. Everybody just took them over. And on the back of it, I think I started an OnlyFans site for my videos. But there you go. Have a look at this. Hereford River Carnival. Now you know what I'm like about Hereford. I have lived there some years ago. Love the place to bits. It's nice to be doing something a bit different, and Hereford River Carnival organisers usually pull out different stuff. Highlights from this year are, as well as all the walking floats and the mascots and the giant puppets, they had dinosaurs. Yes, real live sort of dinosaurs chasing people around. I can just imagine how much fun that was. Roll that in with bumping into the absolutely lovely Romeal in the parade, and it's just about made for an extra special event. Now, bearing in mind that this event is held on August Bank Holiday, you know what that means to this girl. It's very special, and I always try and do something special for it, and Hereford River Carnival always delivers. Pride in the Port, which is the name for, I would call, Newport Pride. As you know, just like Abergavenny, just like Hereford, I have lived in Newport. In fact, I was born in Newport. So it's always particularly special to me. I went to their first event last year, which was held in a park outside the, you call it a city centre these days. It was a town centre when I lived there. Outside the city centre. This year, they did a parade right through the city centre, and their venue, we'll call it, was just on the outskirts there. And I just had to be there. I had to be walking down the main street of Newport with my camera held high through the middle of the town that I was born in and grew up in. One of these days, and I've said this before, somebody's going to come up to me and say, "Didn't you used to be..." Pride in Gloucestershire, PIG, their main event. Now, this has been running for some years, and it has a couple of significances for me. It was the first one Miami Media filmed as a parade, but more importantly, Pride in Gloucestershire was my first ever Pride. In 2017, wasn't properly out, and I stood in the middle of the park there, the field, just looking around, and I can spot the first Priders even now who stand there and look around, and the look on their face says, "I'm not on my own. Look, there's all those other people just like me." It's a magical experience, and it's what Pride is all about.
Told him I didn't like it, was the only one for me. 2 weeks away, I got off, I got out for me, but I had the biggest smile. Oh, I never meant to brag, but I got him where I want him now. Oh, it was never my intention to brag. Steal him all away from you now.
Worcester Mellor Community Day. On the back of, I told you this was a recurring theme. On the back of Worcester Show, I basically explained that Worcester Mellor put on some of the entertainment. They also run events of their own. And this was a very, very low-key little picnic held in what is known as the Commandery here in Worcester. Now, basically, this is an ancient Civil War, as in British Civil War, English Civil War, whatever, building. So it goes back many hundreds of years. And the sight of, unfortunately, the weather bit everybody because everything was going to be in the gardens outside. But the sight of a lovely Indian girl doing traditional dancing in a many hundred-year-old great hall in the commandery is one of these things that is not incongruous, but certainly makes you do a double take. Redditch Carnival. You know what's coming next. On the back of all the work I've done in Redditch this year, it's becoming my second home. I know at one point it was my first home. In fact, I've got one that falls outside the scope of this film. Already they booked me for one for November. But we'll gloss over that. So, Redditch Carnival. So, carnival format, whereas funfair and stalls and a little bit of entertainment, and then the carnival takes place. I think this one kicked off about 3 or 3:30 from just outside Redditch. Motorised floats, motorised events, as well as walking exhibits and everything else coming back into the centre of Redditch. Lovely, joyful event. And I believe, from what people told me, this was the first Redditch Carnival for some years. So people were so glad to see it back. But one of the highlights for me, obviously, I walk along in front of the parade, I go into the parade, I do my crowd splits, I go right to the back, I make sure everybody that's in the parade actually gets in the film, and then I'll just chop in and sort of walk along with the parade. So I chop in front of an outfit called Revolution's Twirlers. Now basically it's a troupe of dancers stroke drum majorettes, and they've got the maces and they've got the batons, and they are extremely good, as you'll see on the film. But I think it was Eleanor who was chief mace right at the front of their little display. Basically, as we were walking along, turned round to look at her twirlers, so they're obviously coming backwards, not realising that the parade had stopped, and now she's throwing up a full-size parade mace, catches this thing, turns round, and she's about 3 inches away from me. The look on her face when she realised she's almost speared the camera girl. Oh, delightful. Dursley Pride. We missed out on Dursley for some reason last year, but Dursley is one of these small towns in Gloucestershire that does things its own way. You can work out why people want to live in Dursley, because it's a lovely laid-back way of thinking. They do things their own way, they do things in their own timings. It's almost a manana syndrome. Having lived in Spain, I understand what that means. And it sort of brings a very laid-back pace of life. So much so, highlights for this were the fire brigade being late for the parade. Gloucestershire's fire service have had a fire engine, all sign written up with LGBT themes, and it goes round to most of the Gloucestershire prides. I've seen it numerous times, but the parade had already kicked off, not early, dead on time, and about 5-10 minutes in, they had to stop the parade, stop all the traffic, and the fire engine came right down to the front and joined. So the fire brigade were late. I just hope they don't do that when it's a shout. And secondly, pride anthems, one of which has got to be YMCA, but in Dursley's case, instead of having the likes of Kyle Finn whipping a whole field up into a frenzy, it was played by a lone flautist in the style of bossa nova. Could only be Dursley. Pride in Weston, full title being Pride in Weston hosting UK Pride 2023. But most importantly for us, the last one of the year, the ultimate, the season closer. It was a struggle yet again, getting up and out early on a Saturday morning to hit the motorway. Bear in mind, there was a little bit of travelling involved, not as much as some, but a little bit. But we all knew this was going to close the season with a bang. Just about everybody who's involved in the Pride movement, all the snappers, all the organisers, all the other video people, a lot of the entertainers that I've filmed, event in, event out, they were all going to be at this one, whether that's by coincidence or whether that's by the new committee of Pride in Weston. They'd gone through a few problems earlier on in the year, and one of the biggest surprises was JJ Potapici turns up as vice chair of Pride in Weston. You just knew it was going to be a good event, and it didn't disappoint. We all went through the event and we kissed and we hugged and we all said, "Oh, brilliant, we'll see you in 2024. And that sort of left a nice rosy feeling. So lovely, gang, there you go. Holly's 2023 in a series of little clips, like I say, that we've pulled out to make you giggle. I hope you enjoyed seeing what we've put together and how we viewed our work out this year, filming for you. And obviously we're going to be all out doing it next year. And obviously it'll bring another year of joy to the film we do. I'll leave you with the absolutely brilliant Kyle Finn whipping up a whole field of people into a frenzy as he gets out, as per normal, off the stage into the crowd to sing his songs and dance along. So much so that on this event it got so tightly packed, myself and a couple of the photographers had to get on the stage. So Kyle was on the floor, on the ground, we were on the stage filming from a distance. It sums up what Pride should be. So there you go, lovely people. Just remains for me, Holly Miami, to wish you all the best until next year. We start all over again, and just to simply say, bye-bye.
Touching hands, reaching out, touching me, touching you. So good. I feel inclined to believe they never would, but now sweet Caroline, good times never seem so good. I feel inclined to believe they never would.